Honourable Senators, members of the House of Commons, it is with a deep sense of pride and pleasure that my wife and I join you here today.
The royal family is no stranger to secrets. From covert affairs to sealed letters and whispered betrayals, the House of Windsor has weathered decades of controversy by keeping its walls impenetrable, or so they believed. But this time, the truth was simply too significant, intimate, and tragic to keep hidden. And now, it's out. What began as a peaceful discussion between King Charles and a few top advisors behind the gates of Balmoral Castle has evolved into the most dramatic turning moment since Diana's death. A single paper, signed, sealed, and intended to remain confidential, has sent shockwaves through the monarchy. What are its contents? A direct royal edict, one that fundamentally alters the future of the British crown. It also doesn't name Camilla as queen. No, the name on the secret paper was Catherine, Princess of Wales. The lady Charles previously thought of as his son's wife is now secretly regarded as the genuine queen-in-waiting, not by public ceremony, not by parliament, but by secret royal command. The move was never intended to be public. It was intended to take effect upon Charles's death. However, the palace failed to contain the leak, and when the truth came out, all hell broke loose. Camilla, who thought she had finally regained her crown after years of public contempt and private humiliation, was the last to learn. When she learned out, not from Charles, but from Princess Anne's caustic tongue, she allegedly fell inside palace gates. Some claim she yelled, others said she wept, but everyone agrees that the betrayal devastated her. Camilla was concerned with more than simply losing her crown. She was about to lose all she had battled for. The image, the respect, the crown she gave up so much to wear, all gone with a single stroke of Charles's pen and the haunting memory of Diana, a lady who never fully left the throne. Meanwhile, Catherine has stayed silent, regal, composed. She did not ask for this, but now it is hers. The timing could not be more significant. With popular faith in the monarchy at an all-time low, people are not looking to Charles. They are turning to her. What happens next will not only change the royal family, but also put every allegiance to the test, because Camilla's breakdown is only the beginning. And the crown? It may already be on Catherine's head, except for the name. Let's find the mystery that broke the palace and revealed the world's chosen queen. It began behind the towering stone walls of Balmoral Castle, distant from London's flashing cameras and deep in the tranquil hills of Scotland. The air was chilly and motionless. Inside the drawing room, just a few top aides and legal consultants had been summoned. No press. There is no public record. Camilla was not present. That was deliberate. King Charles stood at the head of the wood table, looking old and tired, bearing the weight of both his throne and his past. For weeks, he had been caught between history and legacy, rather than duty and pleasure. Camilla had supported him for decades, through divorce, scandal, and contempt. But now he was faced with an unavoidable decision. Who would carry on the monarchy after him? The answer had been whispered for years, but never uttered out, and it was now difficult to ignore. The public had already made its decision. The Commonwealth had already exhibited indications. Even Queen Elizabeth in her dying letters alluded to it. It had to be Catherine. The conference was brief and clinical. A sealed succession document was examined and updated. The phrase was precise. If Charles died or abdicated, Catherine, Princess of Wales, would take over as Queen Consort, not Camilla. It would be a personal insurance policy for the monarchy's future. No announcements. There's no pomp. There are no press statements, just a signature. And with a single stroke of the pen, everything changed. To those in the room, it was a question of survival. Camilla has never truly earned the public's adoration. Her family had become liabilities, with scandals involving titles, privileges, and extravagant spending dominating recent headlines. Meanwhile, Catherine had established herself as the embodiment of elegance, stability, and calm power. She was Diana's daughter-in-law, and whether the palace liked it or not, her lineage was important. But secrets, no matter how carefully kept, have a way of leaking through the cracks, especially in a city like Windsor, where trust is currency and treachery always buys attention. It did not take long for murmurs to begin. One of the junior aides there that day had confided in a relative, a journalist with strong palace ties. Within days, the royal rumor mill erupted. During the engagements, reporters posed unusual questions. The Queen Consort's servants became especially tense. A top editor of a London newspaper was heard stating, "Watch the Waleses, they are about to rise." Then came the call. Princess Anne, stern, forthright, and firmly devoted to the late Queen Elizabeth, called Camilla immediately. According to reports, her tone was icy. She did not mince words. She warned Camilla, "You are no longer the future of our family. It's Catherine now." Quietly, formally, and totally. Camilla did not believe it. She considered it a cruel prank. But when she approached Charles later in the evening, he said nothing. He did not refute it. He merely stood silently. That was all the assurance she required. The palace scrambled. Aides scrambled to limit the fallout, but the harm was already done. The monarchy's secret was revealed. Charles had changed the rules, not merely for succession, but also for power, image, and longevity. And in doing so, he had inserted a knife into the very center of his marriage. Camilla wore the crown, smiled for the cameras, and stood by him on the balcony. But in a covert act of betrayal, he wiped her from the future. Across the hallways of Kensington Palace, Catherine remained silent. She did not contact reporters. She did not adjust her timetable. She didn't even communicate with Charles. But the looks from palace employees told it all. They knew what was written. And the genuine queen, at least in the eyes of history, had recently been selected. It did not take long for the weight of treachery to crush her. Camilla, previously so collected and brilliant at maintaining appearances, shattered behind closed doors when the reality could no longer be hidden. Camilla raced to confront King Charles, instantly following Anne's razor-sharp phone conversation. She stormed into his private study, a place where few dared to speak out. For the first time since their marriage, shouting could be heard from the palace walls. A senior footman stationed just outside the passageway subsequently said that he'd never heard Her Majesty like that. Her voice trembled beneath the strain of rage and despair. The words were strong and unambiguous. "What was I to you? A distraction, a placeholder after everything I've sacrificed?" Charles, who is noted for his deliberate calm, is said to have sat astonished in quiet, not because he didn't care, but because he lacked defense. Camilla had supported him through exile, disgrace, and the worst periods of his public life. For years, she had faced global wrath, being painted as the villain in Diana's tragedy. And now, it appeared that she had been dumped as an afterthought. According to sources inside Clarence's house, Camilla fainted on a tufted chair in the room's corner following the altercation. She cried furiously, paler than before, shivering and gasping for oxygen. Doctors were dispatched within minutes. Palace staff promptly locked down access to that portion of the property, and within hours, a stealthy relocation was made to Ray Mill House, her private countryside retreat away from cameras and the court. The official announcement to the press stated merely that the Queen Consort was under medical rest following a stress-related episode. However, insiders knew otherwise. This wasn't simply tension, it was collapse. Camilla's thoughts apparently plummeted while she rested under the care of private physicians. For years, she assumed the fight for public acceptability was over. She had won over the tabloids, marched beside Charles at coronations, and been crowned at Westminster Abbey. But the harsh reality was revealed. None of it was true. Despite the formal dresses and polite expressions, she had never actually been selected. Camilla was not a queen at that point. She was a lady abandoned by a man who had said he couldn't live without her. Perhaps most painfully, her kingdom was not stolen by another mistress. Catherine represented everything Camilla could never be in the eyes of the public: poised, graceful, scandal-free, and inextricably linked to Diana's legacy. Camilla had long worried that Diana's shadow would never leave Charles's heart. But now she saw that the shadow had taken shape in Kate, and Charles had given it the crown. No news announcement could reverse what had already happened. Camilla's quiet in the days that followed did not reflect strength. It was about survival. She had been devastated, humiliated, and discreetly removed from the line of royal succession. And while the palace tried to control the optics, one thing became clear: a queen who falls in private cannot lead in public. Her rule, though never truly acknowledged, had ended in the most unceremonious manner possible, with a whisper, a signature, and a treachery too horrible to conceal. When the storm eventually reached Catherine, she was not in Windsor or Kensington. She was with her children, assisting George with a school project, baking with Charlotte, and watching Louis chase the family dog in the garden. It was meant to be a normal afternoon. But there is no such thing as ordinary when you marry the future king. The news came from William himself, not a headline or a staff member. He entered the room gently, sat next to her, and revealed the truth. This document, the succession has changed. Camilla had been secretly replaced by none other than Catherine herself. At first, she assumed it was an error, a misunderstanding. She wondered whether it was just a contingency, a legal protection, but the expression in William's eyes told her everything. This was true. This was deliberate. It had already crushed Camilla. Kate did not speak straight away. She merely gazed ahead, contemplating the weight of something she hadn't asked for, pushed for, or expected. She was aware of the crown's effects on women. She could feel the cost in Diana's haunting look, Fergie's exile, and even the silent anguish behind Queen Elizabeth's gaze. The title of queen was never just a role. It was a burden, one that crushed some, separated others, and devoured everyone. But now it was placed in her lap. There was no going back. Nevertheless, Catherine answered in the only manner she knew how, with elegance, stillness, and strength. She made no statement. She desired that her public engagements remain unchanged. In fact, the very following day, she showed up to a children's hospice, smiling warmly and holding hands with families in suffering. Cameras recorded the warmth in her face, but not the tempest behind her eyes. Those inside the palace began to take notice. The crew had always admired Catherine for her warmth and discipline, but now they saw something else: command. There was no whispering in her workplace, no reactive briefings. There are no subtle leaks. She stayed calm, as if she had known all along that this day would come. In a way, she had. Catherine had spent 2 decades preparing for the throne, but never pursued it. She did not demand respect. She deserved it. She did not silence criticism. She outlasted them. And she didn't strive to be Diana. Rather, by living with quiet honesty, she became the only woman the public ever viewed as deserving of Diana's shadow. Even the Queen's former press secretary, speaking off the record, allegedly stated, "The reality is, Camilla battled for the crown. Catherine never had to. The crown found her." Despite the silent elevation, Kate remained extremely sympathetic to Camilla's breakdown. She did not gloat, she did not celebrate, and she certainly did not tell her pals to spin the situation. That was not her way. Instead, she concentrated on her children, about her causes, regarding keeping the family moving ahead. Because if she were to become queen, it would be out of duty rather than ambition. And as the world watched, Catherine did not raise her voice. She simply stood higher. And in that calm elegance, the nation had a glimpse of the future. Not in news releases or legal documents, but in person. Camilla held the title, but Catherine possessed the crown. For Prince William, the discovery was more than simply another twist in royal politics. It was personal, disturbing, and complex. When Charles secretly presented him the paper appointing Catherine as the future queen consort, bypassing Camilla totally, William did not respond at first. He simply gazed at the paper. Look at the words. Look at the implications. The quiet lasted so long that Charles allegedly said, "Is this not what you wanted?" William's response was cold, clear, and honest. "This is what should have been done decades ago, but that will not change what she did to my mother." Because for William, this was more than simply Catherine. It was about Diana, the woman he loved more than anybody, whose eyes he can still see in his daughter Charlotte, and whose agony he had experienced firsthand. He remembered the headlines, the interviews, a public humiliation, the tears. Above all, Diana's light had been darkened by the same guy now pleading for his help. Charles had been waiting years for Camilla to be accepted. He had battled for her, exalted her, and supported her despite controversy. And now, in a muttered act of desperation, he had abandoned her for the sake of legacy. William consented to the relocation, but that did not imply he had forgiven his father. Insiders claim William made one demand, a single non-negotiable requirement. This cannot be undone. Camilla will not have a reversal or public redemption arc. The monarchy moves forward, not backwards. It was a warning and a line in the sand. William had spent years publicly supporting the crown, but secretly, he had been the one who kept the family together. He handled the tension between his father and brother. He protected Kate from the internal upheaval, and he shielded their children from the hardships of royal life. For the first time, he reclaimed authority. According to palace sources, William's temperament altered virtually overnight. He wasn't furious, he was resolute. There would be no more concessions or altering history to make Camilla tolerable. If Charles desired serenity, it could only be obtained through complete clarity. Catherine represented the future. Camilla wasn't. In many respects, this was William's ultimate act of loyalty, not to his father, but to his mother. Diana died struggling to be heard, and now William was assuring that her legacy would live on, not through vengeance, but through repair. Catherine's coronation was not intended to obliterate Camilla. She was being honored to remember the queen who had been deprived of her crown in the first place. Charles, deep down, realized this. He did not resist the request. He did not object, because at that point, he knew that the monarchy's destiny belonged to his son rather than himself. Later that evening, William arrived home, kissed his children goodbye, and sat alongside Catherine without saying anything. She didn't question what was stated. She did not need to, because she noticed it in his eyes. The weight, the choice, and the silent storm had finally subsided. The road was now clear. For the first time in decades, the monarchy's destiny was defined by love rather than falsehoods. While Catherine maintained her composure and William quietly guided the family's future, Princess Anne was having none of it. The Princess Royal, known for her steadfast sense of duty and harsh tongue, was incensed. Not because she favored Camilla, Anne had always treated her with icy civility at best, but because Charles had once again taken a decision behind closed doors, without advice and without concern for the crown's ramifications. Anne did not learn about the sealed document from Charles. She heard it, along with many others, over the palace's whisper network. Camilla had already gone into isolation at Ray Mill House, while Charles was sheltering behind protocol and press quiet. Anne didn't spend any time. She stormed into Buckingham's inner office wing, sought a private meeting with Charles, and ripped into him with a ferocity few had ever seen. "You've undermined the monarchy," she reportedly stated. "Not because you chose Catherine, she was always the inevitable choice, but because you did it in the shadows, like a man afraid of his own throne." Anne, who had spent her whole youth under Queen Elizabeth II's harsh control, had no stomach for royal theatrics or emotionally driven judgments. She appreciated both legacy and procedure, and Charles, in her opinion, had betrayed both. She accused him of causing havoc in the household and at the institution, not by naming Catherine, but by neglecting to lay the groundwork, publicly humiliating Camilla, and making a choice motivated by guilt and pressure rather than strength and clarity. She then revealed the ultimate bombshell. Anne allegedly threatened to disclose a piece of Queen Elizabeth's final private letter, which had been kept under lock and key since the monarch's death. In it, the Queen stated that while Camilla had been a steady companion to Charles, it is Catherine who carries the temperament, dignity, and restraint worthy of the crown. The letter was not intended to be published, but Anne's warning was clear. "If you won't be honest with the people, I will." Faced with the pressure, Charles ultimately caved. The palace began to quietly twist the story. Camilla used to lead events, but now Catherine does. In press images, she was now positioned next to Charles and William, rather than behind. Formal correspondence utilized the phrase "future Queen Catherine," a word never before used in an official setting. Anne did not stop there. She summoned top courtiers and secretly ensured that etiquette reflected the change. Catherine's status was boosted in the royal hierarchy. Staff were urged to plan for a long-term changeover in ceremonial positions. Anne wasn't seeking to make Catherine queen overnight. She was merely setting a clear new line, because Anne thought the crown was already insecure enough. It did not need secrecy, partiality, or another controversy. It needs stability, clarity, and direction. She respected Catherine, even if she didn't always agree with her. The younger lady had accomplished what few others could. She had earned Anne's admiration without trying, by standing solid without ego. Camilla had lost that battle long ago, and Charles? He'd finally exhausted Anne's patience. The Princess Royal walked out of the conference with her head held high and her objective clear. She was not defending Catherine, she was protecting the crown. In doing so, she assured that the monarchy's future would no longer be uncertain. It had already been answered, with or without Charles. Finally, it was not a formal declaration that altered everything. There was no golden announcement, balcony wave, or musical fanfare. The crown changed silently rather than ceremoniously. Camilla, previously so visible and conspicuous, had faded from view. Officially, the palace blamed rest and recuperation, but the world knew the truth. Her reign had finished before it even began. King Charles, now a king torn between love and legacy, seemed increasingly isolated during public gatherings. Yes, I am smiling, but I am also exhausted, hollow. His remarks are more reserved. His gaze scanned the rooms with faraway intensity. Camilla was absent from a number of high-profile events. According to reporters, no explanations were provided. None were required. Meanwhile, Catherine stood tall. At a recent charity banquet, she wore a beautiful sapphire gown, Diana's favorite color, and the connection was clear. As she floated across the hall, accompanied by William, and greeted with standing ovations, it was evident that this was the queen the people had already accepted. There was no chanting, no slogans, just reverence, and with each new day, the royal family gently reorganized itself around her. Not by edict, but by gravity. The younger generation now looked to her as an example. Senior aides relied on her judgment. Photographers framed her in the middle. The press, previously dubious, now refers to her as the silent sovereign. She never demanded power. She just became a figure that authority could not ignore. And Camilla? She faded. No farewell tour. There is no parting speech, just quiet. Because in the world of royalty, the most horrific finishes frequently occur off stage. However, this narrative was not about an ending. It was about a reckoning and a fresh beginning. The monarchy, rattled by decades of controversy, had finally rediscovered its bearings. Not in Charles, not in Camilla, but in a lady who had faced the storm with quiet dignity, unshakable loyalty, and the calm strength of a real leader. Her name is Catherine, Princess of Wales. Whether the palace says it aloud or not, she is already the queen in waiting.